Hi everyone. So I just wanted to go through a few slides to explain the graph that you've got to answer some questions on. It's quite a complicated graph. As you will see, there are two x-axes, one on the left and one on the right, which is a bit unusual. So I'm just going to go through the graph first, and then I'll go through how to interpret what's going on. So there are two variables, there's two pieces of information on this graph. You've got the number of foxes, which I've highlighted in blue, and the number of foxes can be found on the left-hand axis. Then you've got the number of rabbits, and the number of rabbits can be found on the right-hand axis. The only thing to be careful of is making sure you're looking at the right line. So the number of foxes have got the little white squares, and the number of rabbits have got the little black circles to show where the lines are. Then at the bottom you've got the time, so the years going from 1985 to 2001. So what I've done on the next few slides is I have highlighted certain sections of the graph by a green bar. You might be able to see the green bar, it's resting at 1985 at the moment. And this green bar is going to move towards the right so we can compare what's going on with those numbers of rabbits and foxes. So to start off with, we're just going to move from 1985 to 1987. As you can see, both of those lines are going up, which means that the numbers of foxes and the numbers of rabbits are increasing. And this is because an increase in rabbits leads to an increase in foxes. This is because the foxes eat the rabbits. So the foxes are the predator and the rabbits are the prey. Then what happens from 1987 to 1988 is that those lines no longer follow the same pattern. In 1987, as the number of foxes increased, they started to eat too many rabbits, and so the numbers of rabbits started to decrease. The numbers of foxes still continue to increase for a while, and that is because on these graphs there is a time delay. This is because the baby foxes that are born during the period of 1987 to 1988 are from a mating period when there were still plenty of rabbits. So the foxes that are being produced are still from the good times when there were plenty of rabbits in 1987. So there's a delay of about a year. Then we look from 1988 on to 1989. You can see here now that the numbers of foxes are starting to decrease. The numbers of rabbits are still decreasing, but not as quickly as they were before. So as the numbers of rabbits continued to decrease, there weren't enough rabbits for the foxes to eat. So this means that the numbers of foxes start to decrease. They either starve or they can't get enough food to be successful in mating and feeding their offspring. So now we're going to move forward from 1989. As you can see, from this point, the numbers of both foxes and rabbits start to increase again. In 1989, the fox numbers have fallen to levels that are low enough, which means that more rabbits are able to survive. Not so many are being eaten. If you have a look at the numbers from 1990, there are only 6 foxes and there are about 200 rabbits. So if you can imagine how many rabbits could be eaten by 6 foxes, you might be able to think that quite a number of those rabbits are going to be able to survive, have their offspring, and increase in their numbers. One thing to notice is the time delay. So this is the same as before. It takes a little while after the rabbits start to increase before the numbers of foxes start to increase again. So on this graph, it's roughly about a year or so. So the rabbit numbers start to increase between 1989 and 1990, and the fox population doesn't start to increase until 1991 to 1992. You'll notice that there are always less foxes than there are rabbits, much less. So here in 1993, there are still only 12 foxes, but now there are about 300 rabbits. So, in summary, there are a couple of really important points that we just need to be careful of when we are looking at predator-prey graphs. The first one is that there is this time delay. So as we've seen, there is somewhere between a year and 2 years time delay between the changes in the number of rabbits and then following on the changes in the number of foxes. And this is because it takes a while for the effect of there being more or less food, more or less predators, the reproduction times, etc., to have an effect on the numbers. The second thing to be careful of is having a look at the actual numbers. If you just look at the lines on the graph, it's easy to get confused about which organism you're looking at, and also at points it looks like there might be more foxes than rabbits because the line is higher than the line for the rabbits. However, you need to remember that we're looking at the two different axes and being careful that you are looking at the correct line using the key and then going to the correct axis to make any interpretations. So on this graph, even at the highest peak in 1996, there are only 21 foxes, but yet for most of the time there are hundreds of rabbits. The reason for this is because energy is lost from food chains. If you remember back to when we did food chains earlier, the question I put to you is, can you remember what the rabbits use most of the energy that they get from their food for? If you can, pop any ideas onto Google Classroom. Also, can you remember what percentage of energy is transferred from one level of the food chain to the next? Again, any ideas? Pop your ideas on Google Classroom. If I remember, I might put a little bit quiz question on there for you to do. The last point is, you'll notice I've been talking about there being an increase or a decrease in the numbers of foxes and rabbits. Try to not get into the habit of talking about the fact that they all die, because on very few occasions does that actually happen. Most of the time they just cycle up and down in the way that I've described. There are some exceptions which you may see, but it's better to talk about increases and decreases in numbers. Thanks for listening, everyone. I hope that it's been useful. I hope that you are staying safe and well and managing to get some work done and also be creative and stay connected during this time. And who knows, we may see each other sometime soon. Take care. Bye.